Hello, my name is Gretchen of the 29 Palms Creative Center, and this is our clay creature kit instructional video. And as you see, I got a little dolled up for the occasion. I chose for my clay creature today to make an elephant, which is why I put an elephant on my cheek. Okay, so in your clay kit that you got a bunch of tools attached to the board. You got a glaze tile that is showing all the colors that I gave you in these two glaze containers. So the tile is showing you what the glazes will look like after they're fired in the kiln. Slip, or called potter's glue, and then your 5 pounds of clay. And I'm going to show you how to build 5 different things with your 5 pounds of clay. But before you get started, you're going to have to go on a little scavenger hunt around your house. Since we're all stuck at home right now, I thought this would be a great opportunity for you to go and look at your tools in your home in a different way. And the tools you're absolutely going to need are a wood cutting board, not any plastic, because your clay will stick to it. And if you don't have a nice size cutting board, wood cutting board, like mine's pretty small and I've got a crack in it, I have a tile, or it could be a board that you attach cotton fabric to, and that works as a great surface to work on. And then the other tools that you'll absolutely need are a butter knife and a fork and a damp towel, because your hands are going to get dirty and you're going to need to wipe them clean so you don't make a huge mess. Okay, and I'm going to get out one of these brushes right now because I know I'm going to need that pretty quickly when I go to glue things together, and we're going to talk about what that means. Okay, so I'm going to put my tools over here, get my board, my important tools. And the 5 things I'm going to show you how to build in this video, not only a clay creature, but also a stamp mug. And this is going to be something you're going to be able to drink out of as long as it doesn't have any cracks in it. And also I'm going to show you how to make a bowl using a bowl you have at home. And a couple of pinch bowls. That one I turned into a candle holder, and the other is a little knick-knack holder. Okay, so here's what you're gonna have to do. You're gonna have to go on a scavenger hunt in your house, and you're gonna need to find a rolling pin if you have one. If not, I'll show you how to do a slab with that one. Maybe a spatula. A rice spoon might be useful. A melon baller could be very useful. A straw. Any toys. In this case, I used the snake, rubber snake, to impress into my bowl, which I'll show you how I did. And maybe some serving spoons, and I was looking at the holes that they have in them for printing and stamping on. And I had this too, this relief pewter woman that I used on my stamp mug. Old credit card is great to have. And this is a balloon weight that I use to stamp on my mug. And a pizza cutter, which is always fun if you have one. All these other tools I'm showing you, besides the butter knife and the fork, you really don't need any other ones. It's just that they're fun to go on a scavenger hunt. So stop the video here and go find your tools. And now that you've found your tools, you're back. And we are first going to make the 2 pinch pot bowls that I made. If you've ever taken a clay class before, we all know that the first thing we learn how to make are pinch pots. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do with this 5 pounds of clay is I'm going to cut it up into 5 pieces. Okay, So I first take my butter knife and I'm just going to draw across to have 4 sections. And then after I cut it in 4 sections, like so, that last one I'm going to cut in half because that is for the 2 pinch pot bowls we're going to make right now. So I've got that 1 cube, I cut it in half. Ah! And then I'm going to take this cube or rectangle cube and I'm going to pound it into a ball. And however smooth or not smooth it comes out, totally up to you. I have a way of being a little fanatical about getting my clay smooth, but it's not necessary. It's just the way I like it. And I get them pounded into a ball, which is great. And then to make my pinch pot bowl, I'm going to hold it in my hand and I'm going to push my thumbs into the piece of clay. And I'm going to start pinching gently, even all the way around. See how I'm spinning it? And just making my bowl a little bigger, 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 taller, taller, taller. And keeping it thick enough, really important when we're working in clay. Don't let it get too thin because it's just gonna wanna break. If it's thicker, it'll be stronger. It'll hold its own weight. It'll make things really easy. Now here's where I might want to take a rice spoon and start shaping it, and it gets rid of my hand prints in there too. It's a great shaping tool, like so. And I can go reshape it a little bit more. Whatever shape your pinch bowl comes out to, totally up to you. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you how I made the holes in my candle holder. I took a straw and I went around and went all the way through and then pulled it back out. And you can either try to pull it out of your straw or just leave it. I usually just leave it. Just go through, pull out, go through, pull out, and some of them get stuck in there. You can just pull them away like so. And you can see my shape is getting a little bit changed because of the straw that I'm punching through it. So I didn't really worry about the shape too much. And getting all my holes all the way around. So I'm happy with the amount of holes I've made, so I have lots of holes for the light to come through, okay? Now, one thing that's happened to my pinch pot bowl, you see on the edge, see how there's some cracks? And again, I like things smooth. Doesn't have to be smooth, especially since this is not something I'm gonna drink out of. I don't really need to worry about smoothing out this clay. I can leave that because there's no issue of food getting stuck in there since it's not for food. But I like my pottery to be smooth. So this is where we take the lid off of our slip that I gave you. And what slip is, it is clay that I watered down and put in my blender and just made the clay more watery, like a milkshake. And what's great about the slip is that you can get it on your finger and you just smooth it onto the clay and it starts erasing really nicely to get rid of any cracks you don't want. And just be cautious not to use too much slip, because if your clay gets too wet, it's going to start falling apart on you and make things difficult. So there is a fine line in working in clay with it being too wet or too dry. You want it just right, which reminds me, if your clay starts to get too dry, because it's nice and summery out now, you can mist your clay, especially these clay cubes I have sitting here. I'm going to kind of try to keep them in their plastic more or less while I'm building my other shapes. I'm going to give them a little spray so that they don't dry out while I'm working on my 2 pinch pot bowls. Okay, so spray is good and it feels good, cools you off. Okay, so now that I got even a little water mist on my pinch pot bowl, and it started to get a little wet, too much mist on there, so it's starting to get a little mushy. And I realize I have some holes here that aren't all the way through, so I'm going to push that all the way through. And you can see I'm being pretty aggressive with the clay. As long as I don't grab the clay and, you know, and start pinching it totally thin and making it break apart. The key is when you start pinching your clay is that you're pinching it by allowing clay to stay between your fingers that you're pinching, okay? You don't want to pinch it so hard that you're now just smashing it into bits and it just falls apart, okay? So I have made my little candle holder, and I'm gonna make sure my little candle I bought for it fits in there. Fits fine. One thing to know about clay, when it gets fired in the kiln, it does shrink. And actually the other day, my friend and I just measured his cup that he had made, and it actually shrank a half an inch. I was amazed that it shrunk that much. So keep that in mind when you're making things, that they do shrink, okay? So there it is, my quick little candle holder that's gonna allow the light through. Now I did embellish this other one with a little ladybug on the edge of it, and I had simply just taken my leftover clay that I was showing you, and it's gotten dry out. It's getting a little cracky, so I put a little slip on my finger and I start rubbing just a little bit of slip. It's like lotion into the clay, and now it's rehydrated, just like lotion rehydrates our skin, okay? And to make my ladybug, I just made a bigger piece of clay and a smaller piece of clay, and I rolled in my hands into a ball, like so. And the other one, I'm gonna take and roll in my hands and make a little ball. And now we're gonna talk about something really important here. When it comes to gluing two pieces of clay together, if I just stick that on there like that, it falls off. Because what happens when clay is drying, if it is not really well glued on, air gets in the crack and it makes this piece fall off. This is why I said the only two tools you need are a fork and a butter knife. And you already saw what I did with the butter knife of cutting my clay cubes. The fork is here to texture glue. If you're one of my students, you know what I mean by this. And what I mean by this is that I've got the body of my ladybug, and if you notice, I don't have any detail on my ladybug yet. All I have is two balls, okay? Because my hands are gonna be touching this and smashing it. So all I'm doing is general shapes, okay? And I want to glue the ladybug's head on, but I don't want to fall off later. So I'm going to texture by scratching with the fork, texture, and glue. I just put a little touch of slip on there and I squish it together so that now the head is gonna stay on there. And this is where the butter knife could come into play, where you could just smooth out and get rid of that crack around the neck if you don't want it. And also that ensures that the head's not gonna pop off later. Now, one thing, if things do pop off later as they dry, they can all be glued back on, okay? Whether you do it at home with clay or we do it later with hot glue after it's all been fired in the kiln, okay? So now is my time when I can now put the patterns that I want in my ladybug, make its cute little face and its little body. So what I did with the body is I used a handy dandy melon buller. So on the back, I'm going to impress one half for the wings and the other half for the wings. And then I am going to take a paintbrush. I'm going to take this one here, like this guy. Hey, get off of there. Okay, so I take my paintbrush. Whoops, I smushed my ladybug. Let's unsmush my ladybug. Give it a little And that's one thing about clay. Clay is so forgiving. So even if you accidentally smush something, know that you can always fix it. So I'm just taking a little bit of slip, erasing the little fingerprint I put in there. I lost its wings imprints. So let's get its wing imprints back with my melon baller. Burp, 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 burp. So I got its wings impressed on here. And then I'm going to take the back of my paintbrush and just give it 1 dot, 2 dots, so it looks like more like a ladybug. And then one of the other tools I gave you was a wood skewer, and this is great for drawing on to your clay. Now this is getting into some fine detail, right? I gotta get that head reattached. I kind of ripped that off too. Okay, so this is a lot of detail I'm going to draw onto my ladybug, the eyes and mouth. So before you end up smashing it again, let's get it attached to the edge of my candle holder. And what do we do when we glue things together? Texture, texture, glue. And stick it and push it together so it wants to just stay stuck on there, okay? Now that I have my cute little ladybug attached to my candle holder, I can now get my little skewer and make its happy little face. And what I had done with my other one is I had actually made holes up here for antennae. And actually what I'm going to do after it's all fired, when I get it back and it's all colorful and shiny after it's been fired in the kiln, I was actually going to embellish it with some pipe cleaners and make some little antennae so they look sparkly in there. Okay, so there we go. We got our first one down. Now we are going to make our second pinch pot of our other half of that first cube. Again, a ball, and if it's starting to feel dried out, just take a little slip, rub it around, or you can take a little bit of your mist if you're hot. Oh, that feels good. I'm cooling off. And here I got my round ball, and now I'm going to push those thumbs inside again and just pinch, twist, pinch, twist, pinch, twist, not making a hole in it or anything like that. And this time I went a little taller, so I'm kind of pulling upwards with the clay, and I kind of want it to be uneven because this one I want it to look like a flower. And it's going to look more like a flower if I make the edges a little bit more uneven. Whoop! Whoops, tore it. But again, clay is very forgiving. So I'm going to get a little bit of slip in here, and I'm going to reattach those pieces of clay and put it back together. Okay? So not to worry. Clay is totally mendable. Okay? So now I've got my flower shape, and I'm going to actually drop it to make a nice flat bottom. And then I'm going to just kink, kind of grab the bottom like you grab a bottom of a flower and squeeze. And there we go. We got our flower petals sticking out. Now the inside got a little bit smaller than I would like, so all I have to do is pinch out again and get that bottom to be a little bit bigger because I want to be able to put knickknacks in there. Okay, and then this part is up to you, how much you want to embellish with any kind of detail. And what I had done inside of this one was some polka dots, which I had used my can opener end here with a round ball and just simply pushed into the clay like so, and voila, it looks like more like a flower. Okay, so there's your first two items you made. Now the next item we are going to make is, if you want to make a bowl, find a bowl that you like in your home, and the clay is going to go on the inside, not on the outside. Okay, and so let me show you how I made a slab of clay, which is a pancake of clay. And how I made my pancake of clay, my slab, is with a rolling pin. If it turns out you don't have a rolling pin, no worries. I'm going to show you how to do it without a rolling pin, okay? So I'm going to take another one of my cubes. I'm kind of saving the bigger one of my cubes for my elephant, my clay creature, okay? So with this cube, the first thing we're going to do is start smacking it, clay slamming onto my board. And if you notice, when I slab this down, I'm making it go down and towards me. My hands kind of go towards me, and it's usually easier to do this standing up than it is sitting down. And if you are somebody who has a rolling pin, then take your two little dowels that I gave you in the kit, and you're going to put them side by side of your clay. And this is what helps our clay from getting too thin, okay? We don't want our clay to get too thin, because then you end up with holes in the bottom. If you can see, I've got a hole in the bottom of my bowl here. So I got it a little thin. So better to be a little too thick than too thin, okay? So I've got my clay relatively flat, and I've got my dowels here. And when I roll on these dowels with my rolling pin, they're gonna roll on the dowels like they are train tracks, what I like to call it. This is the train and these are the tracks. And that way, when I'm rolling my clay, I am not gonna roll this clay too skinny like I did on my first bowl I had made, okay? So I roll, keep those dowels right there. And if you notice, I had switched the direction of my clay because I want this to be relatively round. I don't want it to get really long. I want it to stay more like a square because it's going to end up as a bowl shape. Okay, so you're always kind of thinking about your shape you're trying to go for as you work with your clay. So you're working together and in unison, all right? We're not fighting it. So this is about right. See where my clay is now the same thickness of the dowels, okay? Really important that you don't go any skinnier than these dowels because your clay is going to start falling apart, okay? So now I've got my flat slab of clay, and I take the bowl that I picked out, and I'm going to put my clay inside this bowl. And it's a lot better if you get a bowl that has flared out walls as opposed to vertical walls. And my slab of clay is laying in there, right? And I'm just going to drop my bowl gently, and my clay starts going to the bottom of the bowl. And not to drop it too hard so you don't break it, right? And then anywhere it's not sitting up against the bowl nice and firmly, I just make sure it's sitting firmly against the bowl. My hands, I can feel that the clay is snug in there. Now, personally, I don't want to keep these edges all uneven. So this is where our little wood dowel can be used as a cutting tool. And so I'm going to take this dowel and I'm going to, let's do it this way so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to cut all even on the top edge, okay? Now my clay isn't very even over here, and I've got this extra piece of clay I just cut off. I'm gonna glue them together. Again, texture, texture, glue, okay? Get that clay together, mend them, and make that crack disappear, okay? Really fun to do. Get it all even Steven. And then if you want to impress into it like I did with the snake, I took my snake, or if you want to just leave it flat, you can just leave it flat and just clean off your edges here. So it's nice and pretty. And the reason I'm smoothing out these edges where my clay's cut a little uneven and jagged, ragged, you want to smooth it out with a slip. Get a little slip on your finger and just smooth out those jagged edges, because when this gets fired, it's gonna get hard, right? Hard like glass, and it's gonna wanna cut you. So you gotta get rid of any jagged edges, really important, okay? And then I'm gonna take my snake, not the bottom part of the snake, but the top part of the snake, and I place it in my bowl, how I like. And I'm just gonna gently push, not really hard so I don't go through it again like I did on my first one. Push, push, push. And now I'm going to get the impression of my snake in here, which is really fun. Okay, ba-da-da-da. And I didn't push it as hard this time, so I didn't make a hole in the bottom of my bowl. Okay, item number 3. We just made a bowl that you'll be able to eat out of after it's all fired and given back to you. Next, we are gonna make a stamp mug, one of my favorite projects. I love to show students and they love making them. Any leftover clay, I'm gonna add it to my other clay. Smush smash it really good together so it's really good and joined up. Any of your clay that you end up re-putting together, make sure it is together good. And if you got big muscles like me, you can get it pound together really solid, because if you have air holes trapped inside your clay, it's gonna wanna crack when it gets fired in the kiln. So we're gonna avoid any crackage by making sure our clay is a nice solid compressed ball of clay. Okay, so I've got my ball of clay, but the first thing I need to do is do what I did with this bowl. I need to make a slab of clay. So I'm gonna smack it down, slab slamming. Let me stand up again. Slab, slam. Get it nice and